Okay, I found this book up at the Candy Kitchen last time we were blessed to go. And I was going to get it at Walmart when I seen it, but the price kind of scared me away. And it was a brand new book from my favorite author, lael Miller. I have a lot of favorite authors, but at right this moment, after reading this book, it was so great. I have to enforce favorite author. I'm going to read the back cover to you like always, and then we've got to hit the paper clips. So here we go. lael Miller creates a vibrant character and stories that I defy you to forget. Debbie Macomber, the #1 New York Times best-selling author. She's looking forward for forever, and he wants to avoid it at all costs. Successful jewelry designer Melody Nolan's work is her life, but while she loves her job, she can't help but want more. Like local chief of police Spence Hogan. Years ago, after one perfect summer night together, he broke her heart, and she put as much distance between them as possible in Little Bliss County. But when they are forced into a close proximity at her best friend's wedding, that chemistry is strong as ever. Spence is a good cop who isn't scared of anything, except love, and he's done everything he can to preserve his reputation as a heartbreaker. A reputation that keeps his marriage-minded women, including Melody, at bay. And yet, there's something about Melody he just can't forget. Something his heart can't ignore. Oof. Now, if that wasn't scorching enough, let's read the note from the author to all of us reading this book. Dear reader, I want to welcome you back to Bliss Country, Wyoming. Mustang Creek, the heart of country, is the kind of small town that appeals to people everywhere, with the kinds of neighbors and friends we all want. And like most towns in Wyoming, it's surrounded by some of the most beautiful country anywhere. The mountains and forests and rivers of Wyoming are still pristine, still wild and always majestic. It's the kind of landscape that defines people, becomes part of them. That's how it was with the characters in this trilogy. The marriage pact introduced us the three friends, Hadley, Becca, and known as Bex, and Melody. Over the course of these stories, each woman finds the man she's meant to be with, and in each case she has a history with him that sometimes gets in the way. For Hadley, it's Tripp Galloway, and for Melody, it's Spence Hogan. And as far as Bex goes, well, we'll have to wait and see. The West and romance are two of my favorite themes, especially when I can bring them together, and friendship, which I've explored in all three stories, is another one. Needless to say, the role of animals in my characters' lives, and in my life, and maybe yours, is also a huge importance to me. There's nothing like unconditional love in an animal. You'll see that with Spence and his dog Harley, as well as his horse Reb. Then there's Melody and her cats, Ralph, Waldo, and Emerson. Neither of these people would be who they are, what they are, without animals who share their households and their lives. Oh, I should mention that I'm just as interested in art and appreciating it and making it, just like Melody. Jewelry especially, among other things. Melody created the charms that commemorate the marriage pact the three friends entered into in the previous book. So there's a lot of me in these characters. I hope you enjoy Melody's story as it comes to realize that her first instincts about Spence Hogan were right all along. Spence is now the police chief of Mustang Creek, and he typifies everything that's most admirable about the men and women who protect us to keep us safe. Please visit my website at lindalaelmiller.com to check out my upcoming books, read my blog, and of course leave your own comments. Happy reading and happy trails to you. This will make sense later in the book. With love, lael Miller. For Bill Francis and Renee Kinsey, two of my best friends I've ever had, with love and thanks. Okay, we're going to start out at page 24, where it drew me into this book, and it was like, I got to find out what happens next. And there he was, Spence Hogan, the only man who had ever broken her heart. Not just hers, of course. Pretty much any attractive female he came in contact with fell into that category. He should have a sign around his neck. Oh, love 'em and leave 'em. Apparently you weren't breathing if you were a female and lived in this town and didn't want to snag a date with him. By all accounts, many had, but she tried hard to plug her gossip ears when it came to him. Spence was crossing the threshold, hat in one hand, standing so tall he almost had to duck to keep from bumping his head on the doorframe. It shouldn't have been possible, but he looked even better in regular clothes than he had in elegantly fitted tux that he worn to the wedding. The guy gave a new meaning to the term quote-unquote best man. Melody thought peevishly. Her rising irritation was due to being constantly thrown into his company for the past 2 days. Hell, she had to sit next to him at the rehearsal dinner. If Tripp's father, Jim, and his new wife hadn't arranged that particular event, she might have really been annoyed at that seating snafu, but Jim was a sweetheart. And his wife probably didn't realize that she had a past with Spence. Besides, it was logical, since she was a bridesmaid and he was the best man. Best man, huh? Best at what? Looking good, making love, shattering dreams? Melody was thrown by the mere sight of Spence, which was weird because not only had they been forced into close proximity by the wedding ceremony, they also lived in the same small community for the most of their lives. Inevitably, they ran into each other fairly often, despite her efforts to steer clear. Nonetheless, her nerves shorted out like an electrical circuit on overload. Why, she wondered, silently frantic, couldn't she just look away, render Spence Hogan invisible, pretend he didn't exist, as usually she managed to do? No answer came to mind, and this development alone was maddening, since Melody always had a ready supply of answers, except when it concerned Spence. Now, Spence, that easy, confident cowboy stride of his and his vivid, new denim blue eyes of his, if she hadn't known any better, she would have swore that he was wearing tinted contacts. The color was striking even from far as a crowded bar, so were the dark hair and his broad shoulders, the way his jeans fit his lean hips and those long legs. Somehow these familiar elements never failed to take her by surprise. Spence had been almost 13 years old that memorable summer when he first appeared in Melody's personal radar. Although he'd been around for a while, she'd been just 6 at the time, already thick as thieves with Bex and Hadley, all of them due to enter the first grade in the fall. Friends with Hadley's big brother, Will and Trip Galloway, Spence hung around the Stevensons' house a lot in those days, shooting hoops in the driveway with other boys from the neighborhood, playing rhythm guitar in Will and Trip's garage band. One day that summer, though, he definitely caught her attention, which started a serious case of hero worship. It wasn't anything more complicated than the chain coming off her bicycle, causing her to wipe out in the street. He happened to be arriving at Will's just then and jumped off his own battered bike. He dashed over, helped her up, and examined her scraped knee and elbow, but not one teasing word was said about the tears rolling down her face. Instead, he used the edge of his t-shirt to wipe them away. Then he brought her inside and delivered her into caring hands of Hadley's grandmother. When Melody came back out, the damage duly cleaned and bandaged, her bike was fixed and sitting by the garage. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, as if he actually cared about the answer. When she nodded, Tripp said, "I adjusted your chain. It was really loose." Will added, "The last time I wrecked like that, I'm pretty sure I cried too. Don't feel like a baby or anything." Then they went back to their basketball game, and that was about it. But both Hadley and Bex were impressed. Normally, in their experience, the boys didn't even notice their existence. Outwardly, nothing had changed that day. Will and Tripp tolerated Hadley and her 2 sidekicks with benign indifference, and Spence followed their lead. Hadley, Bex, and Melody, on the other hand, shared quite a secret new awareness that nothing would ever be quite the same. They giggled and whispered amongst themselves, trying to unravel the mystery of this new fascination, but years passed before they finally succeeded. Now, after all these years, Hadley and Tripp were deeply in love, the forever kind, and as of that very afternoon, joined in holy wedlock. Coincidence? Probably not, Melody mused with a sense of philosophical awareness. Undoubtedly brought on by the events of the day, as she took a sip of her beer some cowboy had brought her. She really believed this wedding was the culmination of something that had started when they were just kids. The fairy tale aspects of their shared history might have fostered legends if Bex and Will had grown up and fallen for each other like Hadley and Tripp, but Will had been killed in Afghanistan, and while Bex had dated a lot, especially in college, she never met, quote-unquote, the one. As for Melody and Spence, they had that summer fling once upon a time before she realized he wasn't interested in a permanence, and she'd been starry-eyed with dreams of a future together, a cozy house, children, and all the rest. And in the end, though, she made a complete fool of herself by blurting out a marriage proposal one perfect night in July. With that last of the Independence Day fireworks still dribbling from the sky, and she would never forget, God knew she tried, the expression on Spence's face as he prepared his answer. Instead of flashing that patented grin of his, instead of saying, "Yes, let's do it," the way Melody had expected him to. Spence had given her a figurative pat on the head and then very gently explained that he wasn't ready to make that kind of commitment, and neither was she. She wasn't even through college yet, Spence reminded her, wounding her with kindness. It had taken her years to recover. She took another sip of her tepid beer as she grimly remembered that night. Yes, he claimed when she was tearfully demanded whether he loved her, he did care for her, very much as a matter of fact, and that was one of the more reasons he wasn't going to be the one to derail her career, maybe even her whole life, before she had a chance to go places, figure out, decide what she really wanted. Before Melody's personal universe disappeared into a black hole, she and Spence had spent virtually every spare moment together. Gradually, they'd grown closer and then closer still, until they finally were together, sweet and slow, under a star-spangled sky, the first time, in a very private place that they could only find after that. Oh, yes, Melody had loved Spencer Hogan with all that she had and all that she was. Silly girl. She actually believed in it that he loved her right back. Until the breakup, of course. Spence immediately consoled himself with Judy McFarlane, and Melody moped around the house until it was time to go back to college in late August. There she was, like a sleepwalker, distracted and depressed, aware that things had to change, and she switched her major from pre-law to fine arts, since she always loved shape and texture and color, and when that didn't help, she hid out in the dorm, skipping classes, meals, and rarely sleeping through the night. Melody's mother was beside herself with worry after years of widowhood. She just remarried, and then she was planning to move to Casper, realizing that she was causing distress to someone she loved, even knowing that she was keeping her mother from enjoying her newfound happiness. Couldn't cure the blues, apparently. Left to her own devices, she would have crashed and burned. Fortunately for her, Bex and Hadley had refused to let that herself destruct. They improvised an amateur intervention, the two of them, confronting Melody in the cramped little room of their three of them shared through college, and Melody had balked at first, demanding they all leave her alone, but they were stubborn as she was, and simply would not give up. They badgered her all on one Saturday until she would have agreed to practically anything just to get 5 minutes of peace and quiet. Knowing that they finally cracked her armor, they pestered her to get out of her pajamas she'd been wearing for days on end, take a hot shower, put on her favorite outfit. After that, Hadley and Bex had dragged Melody out of the dorm and off campus, winding up to the nearest mall in one of those snip and dash salons where a very guy came to pink mohawk, disturbing number of body piercings, ordered her into a chair to proceed to trim and fluff and spray her unkempt hair until she looked almost like her old self again. Miraculously, as it seemed, that was only the beginning of Save Melody from Herself campaign. Next, Hadley and Bex had declared that they were starving, and all three of them trooped over to the food court with a plethora of unhealthy dining choices and agreed, after some discussion, to share orders of yaskipa, chicken teriyaki, and egg rolls. Then, since the multi-screen theater was right there and they'd all fortified by a hot meal, they decided to take a movie in or two. In the end, there was a total of 3, 2 chick flicks and an apocalyptic action film. The next day, she'd gone back to class, for the few weeks afterwards, Bex and Hadley had helped her catch up on the work she let slide. Remembering all that in mere moments, Melody smiled to herself there in the grubby table of the Moose Jaw Tavern, despite her aching feet and admittedly bad attitude. The whole experience was ancient history now. She was reflecting, still watching Spence, still unable to stop watching him as he made his way across the sawdust floor, pausing here and there to exchange a friendly word or handshake with somebody, or to laugh at some joke. He approached the bar, spoke to the man behind it, but came away without a drink. Spence rarely indulged in alcohol. He told her once that it smoothed away the rough edges a little too well, whatever that meant. At last, with an enormous effort, Melody finally managed to tear her eyes away from him, her face burning at the difficulty, and when she shifted her gaze in the opposite direction to catch Bex grinning in that knowing way that best friends have, Melody grimaced at her. Bex, unruffled as usual, laughed and shook her head, rising, and with another yet a cowboy asked her to dance. "Don't be surprised if I'm not here when you get back," Melody yelled over the music. "Suit yourself," Bex yelled back, good-natured to the end. Melody was beginning to feel like a real wallflower, which was a stretch, considering how often she'd been invited to a dance since she and Bex arrived at an hour or so before. After a few polite refusals, the invitations had stopped coming, and that had been okay with her and with her screaming feet. "Time out. We'll be back in a minute. Mom's calling."